talking about money. I don't like to charge people for things, but like the world doesn't work that way. And that's the thing. Like, I think there is a DPC culture of you don't need anyone. You could do it all yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually not very effective for a long-term sustainable career. When I heard about DPC in residency, and I was like, nah. But most of my new patients now are coming from referrals.
Welcome to DPC Life, the podcast where independent doctors share real stories, bold ideas, and the freedom of doing medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Ann Gonzalez, and together we'll explore the wins, the struggles, and everything in between. Let's dive in.
So my guest today is Dr. Rebecca Berens. She is the founder and owner of Vita Family Medicine in Texas. And thank you so much for coming on. You've been open 4 or 5 years now, correct?
6, actually.
6? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you're a year ahead of us. So like I said, I've been kind of watching you as you've grown. So thanks for coming on. Now, why don't we start with, let us know how you got into DPC, how you found it, and what made you switch.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Sure.
I started thinking more seriously about DPC after my son was born. So at the time I was residency faculty at a family medicine residency, and I loved my work, but it was becoming increasingly difficult for me to navigate doing a good job at work and also doing a good job at home. And prior to that, I had been at an FQHC and similarly loved the work, loved the patients, loved the people I worked with, but just was not sure how I was going to manage to do that and also take care of children at home. Just because emotionally, you get home and you're completely emotionally drained, and there's just not a lot of space for other things in your life. And so anyway, after coming back, after having my son, I just started thinking about what I wanted my career and life to look like. My family is important to me. I wanted to make sure I was able to be there for them. So I was looking into what are my options for not full-time employed practice, right? And I had heard about DPC in residency, but I didn't ever really seriously consider it at that point. I was like, oh, that's interesting, but that would never work for me. But I started learning more about it from other DPC doctors that I met through the internet. And it started to seem like a more serious possibility. And so I just decided I would give it a try.
Yeah. So you had been in practice for how long before you started?
I had been in practice about 3.5, 4 years by the time I opened. 2 of those years were at the FQHC, and then about 1.5 years at the residency faculty position. Uh-huh. Yeah, and then I opened in January of 2020.
Yeah. Oh, great time.
I know. It was great timing on my part. Who knew?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a whole thing.
A lot of people opened around the same time as you and said that they grew very steadily throughout the pandemic. What did you experience?
Yeah, so definitely not what I was hoping for my first year. So part of the issue was I opened in January, and then March of 2020, obviously everything started shutting down. The same week that my son's daycare closed they said they were closing for 2 weeks because they'd had a case of COVID and they were trying to do case control. And that same week I found out I was pregnant. And so we didn't know much of anything about COVID at that point. And I was very concerned about being exposed, especially in my first trimester. And then I also didn't have childcare. I didn't have childcare. I was worried about sending my child back to daycare because, of course, they bring home everything. And I was like, it's a matter of time before he brings that home. So I actually ended up from March till June pretty much just barely working on the DPC for 2 hours a day while my son was napping and doing pretty much all virtual, like networking, virtual visits. I did get new patients during that time who were looking for virtual visits because obviously that was a time when that was what people were looking for. But because I hadn't really well established myself from a networking standpoint yet, I didn't know a lot of people, so a lot of people didn't know about me. So I think that was definitely a limitation. And then after, my mom works for a school district, and she was available to help with childcare, so then I was able to start doing more. And I did grow, but then I had my daughter in November, so then that kind of, it was an up and down year. It was not at all what I projected when I opened.
Well, yeah, it never follows the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about this is an interesting thing. A lot of women go into DPC for the same reasons that you did, right? Because of the flexibility and raising children and being there for their kids, but then still being able to practice medicine because you can have two loves, of course, right? Your career and, of course, your family. So, how did you make that work? I mean, you started early and then you had a kid right after, and so that's a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was the pandemic.
Yeah, it was that year was just a fun year for all of us. But yeah, I think it was definitely a bumpier start. And I think it was frustrating for me initially because I felt very behind. Because, like you said, there's a lot of people who opened at the same time as me, and I saw them really growing and hitting milestones that I had sort of projected for myself that I was not hitting.
So you're saying it was frustrating because you felt behind?
Yeah, so I felt behind because I was seeing everyone else that had started around the same time I did really growing and hitting the milestones that I had sort of expected and projected for myself after researching and planning for a while. And so I felt very behind, but I think that I just had to sort of reframe that, like, this is the season I'm in with babies, and that's just how it's going to be. And I've actually had a third child, so I've had now 2 maternity leaves during DPC. And yeah, I think it definitely, you just figure it out. That's what you, when you're a parent, you just have to figure it out. And just, I think just trying to hold myself to a little bit of a different standard that I'm seeing for other people who are in different seasons of their life. It's just not going to be the same. And initially that felt very like I was failing or I wasn't doing it right. But then I sort of realized it's just not going to be the same. So we just have to just do what we need to do for where we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very much kind of the same thing. You've seen one DPC, you've seen one DPC, everyone's a little different. And we just have to give each other grace because it is going to be different. And like you said, the different seasons of life, you just can't give the same thing that you can if your kids are grown and out of the house, as opposed to having 2 under 2. It's way different, way different. And so over the past several years, I think it sounds like you've kind of shifted a little bit in where your focus is with your practice. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, when I opened my practice, my real goal was I wanted to just be accessible for patients who don't have otherwise access to primary care. And I'm in the Houston area, and we have a huge, I think it's 20% uninsured rate in Houston. And there's a great need, and that's what I was going for. And you get your initial bunch of patients that come, and I have lots of patients that have actually been with me since 2020, who I love. But over the years, one thing that I think really started to begin the shift in the practice was I have a patient that I'm referring for dietitian services, for example. I specifically will look for a dietitian that is weight neutral, health at every size aligned. That's just a philosophy that I personally follow in my practice. I had an eating disorder when I was in college, and I was introduced to that concept in recovery, and it's just something that has always informed the way that I practice. And so I was referring then my patients who I needed dietitians, I was looking specifically for these dietitians. And so then these dietitians would reach out to me and say, oh, like, you're a doctor sending patients here. That's not usually how that goes. They're maybe getting patients through an eating disorder treatment recovery process or from a therapist, or it's less common, I guess, for them to get referrals from physicians. And so I just started meeting all of the specialists in the Houston area who are therapists and dietitians that treat patients who are recovering from disordered eating or eating disorders. And just in building those relationships, they were seeing me as a safe person to send their patients to. And I really love working with those patients because we have very similar sort of goals and philosophies. And I think they felt heard and seen. And I felt these were people who wanted, like, I feel good when I'm able to do something that's working for the patient, right? And so it just sort of naturally shifted that I started getting more and more patients who were specifically in recovery from disordered eating. And not all of them with like severe active eating disorders. Most of them had a history or something like that and were no longer actively in their eating disorder, but just had metabolic health problems. And they go to the regular doctor and they get a handout, well, here's how to lose weight. And it just floods everything back to them. And so just being able to work with patients in a mutually aligned philosophy that worked for both of us and I just started getting more and more of these patients referred to me. And so that's almost exclusively the patients that I see now, because I think just like I know the community in the Houston area really, really well, of therapists and dietitians and other clinicians that treat patients recovering from eating disorders. And so it just naturally shifted that way over time.
So there's a lot of word of mouth and, getting patients from referral sources like those dietitians and other specialists.
Yeah, almost exclusively. Yeah. I mean, I think, of course, like there'll be some people who might Google and find you, and I have social media content that people sometimes find. And after 6 years, my Google SEO is pretty good. But most of my new patients now are coming from referrals.
That's fantastic. At what point did you find that word of mouth was really driving your new patient growth?
I think it's pretty much always driven my new patient growth, just different. So one of the main things that I did that first year in 2020, when I couldn't really network in the way that I wanted to, because even there were virtual networking meetings happening, right? But I literally had for 3 months, 2 hours a day that I could do anything. So a lot of what I did was just going into neighborhood Facebook groups, like mom groups, physician groups, and just responding to people's questions in a helpful way and getting to know what people were looking for in the community and then being able to serve in that way. And so people got to know me who'd never actually met me just through these groups. I met a lot of other clinicians in there too, like physical therapists and dietitians who are also moms in these mom groups. And so then word of mouth built that way, sort of virtually. And then as things opened back up again and we were able to go to more events and I would be asked to speak maybe, or I would go to educational events that were being held by dietitians or therapists or the eating disorder specialist group, and I would start to meet people that way, then it sort of shifted. But it's pretty much always been word of mouth. It's pretty rare that someone just randomly finds me on Google. It happens, but it's not the most common thing.
And that's fascinating. So the groups that you're in, I know a lot of Facebook groups, of course, community groups, like you can't just post and advertise. They don't like that. So all of these posts that you're responding to were questions, I guess, from people saying, I need a doctor, or what kinds of things were people putting out there?
Yeah, so like some people would post, like sometimes it was just like mom questions and I would just post in response. But if it was something where I was giving not medical advice, but like advice that's informed by the fact that I'm also a doctor and that is where I'm coming from and giving this advice, I would mention that. Because especially like one of the common things was like breastfeeding questions. So I also got my IBCLC which is the International Board Certified Lactation Consultant certification. I was kind of studying for that as I opened my DPC, and then I got it, I think, about a year in. And so people would have breastfeeding questions and I would answer and be like, I'm also like not just a random person that's telling you this. I am a doctor and I breastfed my kid and I'm an IBCLC. And so people would then see that. And then sometimes what would happen is if there was a question that came up that was something I'd previously responded to that was helpful, people would start tagging me to respond. And so then I would go in and respond. But I was never really doing any sort of salesy messaging. For me, it was more so getting to know who's in the community and what do people need and how can I help? Because I just have this idea that if you put yourself out there as helpful, you're showing people who you are and you're contributing to the community, and that will come back to you in some way. It doesn't have to be a direct transactional relationship, right? It's just building community and contributing to your community. I think there's, of course, going to be benefits there. So it was not actually that often that I was saying anything about this is my practice and this is what I do and this, come see me. I'm pretty much never doing that. There were times where I would post if we were hosting like an event or something. They have a Marketing Monday or whatever where you can post an event. And a lot of times too, I would just message the admin, hey, we're hosting this free event that people in the group might be interested in. Is it okay if I post it? And then that would be fine. But again, the post was like, here's a free event to help you, not, hey, come see me and pay me. It's a different, it's not a salesy way of interacting.
Right. So tell us more about the events that you were doing.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, one of the things that I was actually really focused on when I opened was breastfeeding and like postpartum care, because that, I think I was personally recently in that season, and also just felt like that was a real gap in what's available to patients, because it's really hard to find good lactation care, particularly in a medical sense. There's lactation consultants, of course, but if there's anything medically going on, a lot of doctors are not very well educated, or at least at that time they were not. I think it's improving. But anyway, I did some like free virtual breastfeeding classes, and I would do one a month. And I would just post them in the mom groups like, hey, if anyone wants to come and learn just the basics about breastfeeding, you can come to this free virtual event. And I would have people come. We posted on Eventbrite. I even had people from other states come sometimes, because Eventbrite shows virtual events everywhere. So like we'd have people from other states or even other countries show up. And it was just
pretty wild,
yeah,
right?
yeah, because it's just Eventbrite just like pushes out the stuff, I guess, based on the interests of the people, right? And so, yeah, so people would come and I would do a little maybe 30-minute presentation about whatever the topic was, mostly breastfeeding at the beginning, but more things as we went. And then we would have a Q&A at the end. And then I started doing more events, particularly last year, where I would bring in someone that I'd met who was a specialist in some area, like a cardiologist or a dermatologist or a physical therapist or something that had some expertise that I don't have. And they would be able to present something to both my patients and then anyone from the community that wanted to come to learn about whatever their area of expertise was. And it was great for me because I got to learn from them. And then also it allowed me to bring to my patients, my patient audience, and then also just my larger community audience, connecting them to like, these are people that I know and trust and work with that can do something for you that I can't do. So yeah, I think that's been really helpful. And I think, again, just built the network in a very organic way.
Mm-hmm. So once you started doing these events, did you start seeing a growth in your new patients?
I mean, I don't know that I ever directly get any patients from these events, maybe on occasion. We did a couple in-person events actually where people did come and we did like an in-person presentation, and immediately after they would say, oh, I want to come see you. But more so with the virtual events, I think it's more community building, because actually a lot of the people who attend the events are other clinicians and just people who like maybe they're therapists, maybe they're a dietitian, and they just don't have a lot of connection to the medical community, but they're seeing patients who have a lot of medical concerns and questions, and they don't know where to send them. But it's not in their scope to do anything about it. And so for them, they like to go and they like to learn and then be able to refer. And so I think it actually has been more of a way of building the referral base than anything else. And it allows me to continuously interact with the people that often refer to me, and I get to know them really well. They get to know me really well. And we get to see times where it makes sense for us to share a patient, like, oh, this is a patient that you can help, so I'm going to send them to you, and vice versa. So, but it's never the intention behind it necessarily. That's kind of how it happens. And then I just think for the community, like, there's sometimes random people that I don't know who somehow find out about the event and show up, and whether or not they turn into a patient, I feel like they at least got some information that might be helpful to them. And later, if they're talking to someone or if they later need something that one of us can help with, they'll remember, oh yeah, they taught me this thing. That's a person I can ask about this, right? And so it's more indirect, I think.
I think that's very true. You know, like we personally in our practice, we've gone to events before and they've been attended well. We talk to a lot of people, but then when you think about how do you measure kind of the effectiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of what you've done. It's so hard because you can't just say, well, I definitely got 2 patients from this event. I think my thing is saying network is struggling, which is really annoying because I'm on my hotspot, which is usually like,
yeah.
As I was saying, yeah, you can't really measure it because it's kind of this web effect, right?
Yeah.
It's a spider web effect because these people will hear about you and then they just remember it, like you said, and then when they meet somebody or they see a family member that, oh, you can benefit from this kind of practice. That's really the true value of these kinds of events. So people sometimes feel disappointed because I didn't get anyone, but every touch point counts, even though you don't see any result immediately. And I'm sure you've seen this where people will come to you and say, well, I've been watching you for a couple of years and finally decided it's time to join your practice. That happens a lot. So you obviously are very educated about business. Did you have business training before, or how did you learn?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I would say when I started, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I thought I had done a lot of research and I was like, okay, I think I know what to do, but it's just, when it's in theory, it's so different than in practice. And then, yeah, I had absolutely know what I was doing, and definitely made a lot of mistakes from a business standpoint at the beginning. I'm inherently not a businessy kind of person, and I don't like talking about money. I don't like to charge people for things. If it were up to me, I would just work and do it for free and it would be great. But like the world doesn't work that way. So yeah, so I was really struggling from that standpoint. About a year and a half in, I think it was middle of 2021, I was like, okay, I've built some momentum here, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know how this is going to work financially. Like, I'm seeing the patients and I'm helping them, but I don't know if this actually can work for me. And I wanted to figure out what I was doing wrong and how I could improve that. So I ended up joining the EntreMD Business School, which I don't know if people that are listening may or may not have heard of that, but there's Dr. Una has a podcast called the EntreMD podcast, and it's a podcast specifically for physician entrepreneurs. And then she has a business program that I decided to join because I was like, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but something's not working. And I've actually continued to be in that program since the middle of 2021. So it's going on, 5 years now? Is that right?
Wow.
Yeah. So
and that is an investment.
It is.
It's truly an investment.
It is a big investment. But I think because it's a big investment, you are very committed to getting something out of it, because I think there's a lot of free advice on the internet about DPC. And you get what you pay for, is all I'm going to say about that. Because I was following a lot of free advice that I got, and it was helping in some ways, but it was really hindering me in other ways. Because I think the problem is that everyone's context is very different. So like the person giving you advice is talking about what worked for them in their season of life, in their community, in their style of practice. And that just does not translate to everyone. So there has to be a more like strategic and systematic way of thinking about it, where you look at what you're actually dealing with and go from there. And that's what I feel like I really got from that program. And just a different way of thinking. I've also read a ton of books, like a ton of books. I've learned from all the different books that I've read about business and sales and networking and finance and all of these things, because they were just skills that I absolutely did not have. And so it's been like a gradual process, but I think the biggest thing that I found helpful was the business school for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am a complete Dr. Una fangirl, I will admit. She came on the podcast a couple months ago, and I was just like,
yeah, she's amazing.
She is amazing. And there's a lot of benefit to reading the books. What are your favorite books? I'm guessing Dr. Una's, but then beyond.
Yeah, so I mean, I read Dr. Una's books. I'd already been in the business school for a while, so I was like, nothing was new.
You'd heard it.
But I think a couple books that I think have been standout ones for me. One is called She Sells. And that one is excellent. It sounds like you've read it, but particularly for women, I think it really addresses a lot of the specific hangups that we have around selling and around just the way that we might have to do things differently given our season of life that we may be in and our different responsibilities or priorities. So that one is excellent.
And that one is by Megan DiPietro, and I'll link it in the notes.
Yeah. I couldn't remember her name, so I was like, I don't want to butcher it. I'm trying to think about some other really good ones that really stuck with me. Oh, there's one called Buy Back Your Time, which I guess
Yes.
Have you read that one?
Yeah. What is his name?
Dan Martell.
Yes.
Yeah, that one was great. And then I'm trying to think.
And Buy Back Your Time is all about literally buying back your time.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's an investment.
Yeah.
But you have to look at it as far as on balance, whether you pay somebody to clean your house for $100 a week when you take those 4 hours that you would have been doing it and building your business.
Yeah.
It's kind of,
or resting because you're like exhausted.
Exactly. Resting.
Yeah.
It's true.
Like,
or exercising.
Yeah. Like there's so many, and that's the thing. Like I think there is a DPC culture of you don't need anyone, you could do it all yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually not very effective for a long-term sustainable career. Like it just doesn't work. And I think especially when you're a parent, like there's a shift when you become a parent of having to rely on other people to help you, because you cannot parent alone, right? You have to have help from someone, whether it's babysitter, daycare worker, grandparents, neighbors, who like you need to rely on other people. And I think that is very difficult to learn. And I think a lot of people, when they're starting DPC, they're like, I just want to do everything, and this is the way I'm going to do everything. And you just can't do everything. You have to have other people help you. Even in a micro practice, right? You can't do everything in a micro practice. You do need to have someone helping you with something. And maybe it's not a practice specific thing, but you have to have help to be able to run a micro practice. And I think that's like a misconception that I see a lot. And that I also sort of believed when I was starting. I was like, oh, it can just be me, and I won't need to hire any staff, and it'll be great. And yeah, no, that's not how that works. So those are two that like really stick out in my mind. And then I guess I'll say the one that I'm reading now, this is actually, we have a monthly assigned book in EntreMD that is really great. And the one we're reading now is called Influence by Robert Cialdini, I want to say. I'm saying that right. And that's a really good one it's not directly marketing, but it's just understanding the psychology of what influenced us to make decisions. And that is applicable to marketing, but also applicable to like even coaching and motivating patients or working in a team. There's so many, or just in life, there's so many applications to that. And it's been a really great book. But those are the ones that immediately jump out at me. I'm sure I have others. Maybe I can find my list and send it to you after, and you could put it in the show notes or something.
Yes, yeah. I have a list on my website of favorite ones, but the one I've just read recently is Benjamin Hardy, 10 times is easier than 2 times.
Oh, yes. We read that one about a year and a half ago in EntreMD. Yes, that one is very good. Yeah.
And again, it comes back to that you can do it yourself. You're never going to get very far if you do everything by yourself. Yeah. And then, about the 10x, I guess it's really 10x is easier than 2x. It is really true. When you think about goals, I guess maybe you can kind of think about, well, is 3 kids harder than 2? Once you have that second kid, you're kind of
after that, they just kind of deal with themselves. It's really not. It's really no big deal at that point.
Yeah, so you mentioned also in your Facebook groups how you were serving, right? And this is a big thing also, it's very Dr. Una. Selling is service, right? I keep talking about how, because women and doctors, we don't like to promote ourselves. Yeah. We don't like to talk about ourselves. But if no one knows about you, you just can't get anyone to join your practice if you don't talk about yourself.
Yeah. But I think there's a way to do it that's not just talking about yourself. Like to me, it's getting, I'm just like a kind of like a shy, introverted person. And so the idea of posting in Facebook groups was like very scary to me. But I think it was a good entry level into networking because I was like, at least no one's looking at me, right? I can just log off. I get scared. But so it helped me build the muscle of just talking to people I don't know, and also just being able to recognize like, hey, I actually have something I can offer. And I'm not doing it in a way of, I'll give this to you if you do this for me. It's, again, just like contributing to the larger society. And that's something that obviously now, with the way our society is built, like everything is the virtual space has taken a lot away from society. Like all the community meeting places and group events in person just don't happen in the same way that they did before. So we have to sort of recreate some of that in a virtual space to get that human connection. And that's the way I see it, is like, it's just, this is the way that we're doing our normal human connectedness in this weird virtual space.
Right. Yeah. So it goes both ways. So selling is service. Service is also selling, but not in a selling kind of way. Yeah. Well, I wanted to shift a little bit to your new podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'm really excited about it because honestly, I get a lot of these same kind of questions, like people come up and they say, I heard this on TikTok or blah, blah, blah. What do you think? And it does take time to talk about these things. So I'm not going to tell them there's this awesome podcast.
Well, thank you.
I want you to listen to. So tell us more about the podcast and how you and Dr. Singh got together.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you said that because that was exactly our goal in making the podcast. So it's called The Antisocial Doctors, and it's myself and Sonia Singh, who's another DPC doctor in the Houston area. And she and I met right before she opened her practice. I had been open almost a year, I think, at that point. And she basically she was opening very near me, and she called me and she said, hey, I'm opening near you, and I don't want us to be like competing. I want us to like work together. I was like, great, that's what I want too. And so we've also both had our children together through DPC. We've peripherally been working together. We cover for each other when we're on vacation, on maternity leave, all of this. So we've kind of built our relationship over time through both being DPC doctors and moms. But we both have, I would say Dr. Singh's niche, if anything, is maybe more like health anxiety. And then I have this sort of niche of disordered eating. And there's a lot of social media that goes into both of those issues. Social media has a huge influence on both of those things. And we are also primary care doctors. So the experience that every primary care doctor is having now of, I saw this on TikTok, what do you think? Or, oh, I'm taking this supplement because I read it does this. Or like, I read I shouldn't take this medicine because it has this and this side effect. And social media is really entering into the exam room and it can become a barrier between physicians and patients. And of course, during COVID, a lot that happened on social media that influenced the physician-patient relationship. And so our goal with this was really to look at what are people hearing on social media. So each episode we cover some sort of viral either trend or claim or something that you might see on social media. And we break it down into what's fact, what's not fact, what is a nuanced way of understanding this? Because a lot of what we've seen with doctors that are on social media trying to sort of like debunk misinformation is it's kind of snarky and rude and just increases that division. And the way that we both approach this with our patients, but also the way that we just in general would prefer the world to be is like, hey, you know what? If you saw this, there's a reason that it made sense to you. It's not because you're stupid. It's because there's a kernel of truth in there somewhere. And there's a lot of real like fear or uncertainty, or there's something that made this appealing to you. And it's because that's real. It's not a bad choice that you made. It's not because you're stupid. It's because there's real stuff there. And what is the nuance there? And how can we help a patient come to an informed decision with real factual information, and also really pointing out and calling out specifically the flaws in the healthcare system, the gaps in research, whatever it is that has allowed this thing to become bigger than it probably should be based on the facts. And so that's sort of the approach that we take in each episode. So the goal is that, yeah, there's an episode that you can direct a patient to that says, whatever the claim is that they've heard, hey, there's a whole podcast episode about this. I want you to go listen to it. And for each episode, we have an accompanying Substack post where we sort of summarize it if you don't have time to sit and listen to the whole podcast and you just want to hit the high points. And it has little scripts at the ends of like how you can talk about it with the patient. And from the patient too, how they can look at this and say, oh, okay, this is like a more nuanced discussion of this than I got in my 30-second reel that I saw. So now I understand it better and I can make a more informed choice.
That's fantastic. I think that's going to be a big time saver for a lot of doctors. And I love the name.
Yeah. We were really waffling about the name, but we were both like introverted people and we're just like, we're not antisocial, but we're also just, So, yeah.
I love that. That's so funny. That's great. Well, I wanted to ask you just one last question. Someone asked me this question yesterday, and I thought, oh, that's a really good question. So in the past 6 years with your practice, what have you done that has given you the best happiness ROI, the best happiness return on investment? I thought, that's an amazing question.
Yeah. I think it's a more of a mindset shift than an action. And that's a gradual thing over time. But like I've said this to Dr. Una before, like I feel like the EntreMD Business School has done more for some aspects of my mindset than therapy has. I've been in therapy for a million years. And there's some things that you just don't get past in therapy that like when you have to start and run a business and adjust yourself to be able to do that, you just have to make these mindset shifts. And so it's nothing it's not like one thing that I could point to, but it's just the way, like, I guess it's maybe self-concept and what you believe is possible for yourself and what you're capable of starts to gradually shift and you start to see more possibility. And then that affects the way that you see yourself and the way you show up as yourself in relationships and in your social life and all of that. Like, it's just, you just kind of change. And like the core part of you is still the same, of course, but like, any little hangups that you have start to fall away. So I would say that I don't know, that's not really one thing, but maybe
Well,
hopefully
that's
that
really
answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's really important though, because that's really key to running your business, right? Is because if you can't get over these kind of mindset blocks, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
And yeah, because imagine yourself 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I heard about DPC and residency, and I was like, nah, that would never be something I could do. And yeah, when you just have to do it and you don't have it, like now I'm in, don't have a choice. Like I'm either going to fail or I'm going to succeed. And if you decide you're going to succeed, you just have to change some things. And yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to finally get to talk to you and hear all about your practice and what you're doing, and tell everyone, how to find you on the internet and the podcast again.
Yeah, absolutely. My practice is called Vita Family Medicine, and we're located in Sugar Land, which is just outside of Houston, Texas. Our website is vitafamilymed.com. I have my own personal social media handles, which are at Rebecca Berens, MD, which is on Instagram and TikTok. And so I post things there relevant to the practice, relevant to the podcast, and just educational kind of stuff as well. And then the podcast is called the Antisocial Doctors Podcast, and you can find it on any podcast platform. And we also have a Substack called theantisocialdoctors.com, no hyphen or anything. And that will take you directly to our Substack, and you can subscribe, and then you'll get a notification for every new episode and the summary that I mentioned that has sort of talking points if you don't have time to listen to the whole podcast before you talk about it with the patient.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. And we'll post all the book recommendations and all the links and everything in the show notes. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Hope to see you sometime in person.
Yes, I hope so.
One more thing before you go. Knowing where to find patients is one thing. Knowing what to say when you find them is another. If you're still in the planning stages and you want to nail down your practice identity and messaging before you start marketing, go to dpcfoundations.com. Founding member price is $4.99, and I would love to have you join us.
Thank you for listening to DPC Life. If today's conversation inspired you, hit follow, leave a review, and share it with a friend who's ready for change. Remember, wherever you are in the journey, your DPC family has your back. Until next time, keep building a practice and a life that truly fits you. This show is brought to you by DPC Ads and Minutes and Harmony Ops Health, helping independent doctors like you grow and thrive.